Now for a review of what's making the headlines in the papers this morning. Well, Yolanda and I will be handling that. And of course, there's a lot more in the papers. So Yolanda, apparently there are certain issues that have made the headlines in almost all of the dailies. So why don't we check them out? Absolutely, absolutely. And now we'll start with This Day, our sister publication. At the top of it, it says Tinubu nominates Abe Adeniji for NUPRC and DPRA board chairman. Seeks Senate's confirmation of their nominations with 19 other members of both boards. Slightly below that, we have a headline that we've been talking about all over. Captured Maduro pleads not guilty to U.S. charges, says, I am still president of my country. I think we'll take a look at that one later on. Of course, he's sounding very, very defiant, even if he's actually in the clutches of his enemies. Absolutely. We also have Wike Basiru in dramatic clash over Fubara's second term. They're saying keep off Rivers politics or face the consequences. Don't take my support for Tinubu for granted. Now, Basiru demands FCT minister's resignation, says his support for Tinubu does not make him an APC member. Insists Wike's attempt to destabilize Rivers APC won't be tolerated. Above that, we also have a very interesting story that we'll come back to as well. 9 soldiers die, 5 seriously injured in a mine blast. I believe that was an IED explosion. Oh yes, that was an IED. Yes, and that was an ambush that happened in Borno State. Now, troops eliminate 5 terrorists, rescue kidnapped hostages in Borno, says the military. Now, bandits abducted 4 travelers in Kwara, and then also Kebbi announces reopening of schools in major cities, towns, and states. It's about time that happen. That's pretty quick, but maybe because they don't have an immediate security threat to deal with. Yes. Well, we now move over to the Daily Sun too, and the stories are basically the same, but then this is another dimension to the troubles, or should I say the controversies surrounding the Minister of the Federal Capital Territory, Nyesom Wike. Right. So right there at the top right-hand corner, PDP crisis, Turaki, Wike camp, renew fight. Minister's men battle for control of state chapters. So that is within his own party, the People's Democratic Party. And right below that, Wike APC scribe fight over Fubara. Well, whether it's Fubara, whether it's Rivers State, but then the rider says, stay clear of Rivers politics, FCT minister warns. And of course, the APC's National Secretary, Ajibola Basiru, fires right back. Resign now. You can't control APC, says party secretary. And right below that, we have another story in the nation's financial and economic sectors, where Mbaka Doso, Adeola, Barao, Wike, Lawal, Yusuf, Otumakinde, Obaladoja, Bishop Okonkwo Kuka Galadima Uzodima's wife Igwe Orizu won the Sun Awards for 2025. That's a pretty long list. And right below that, you have all the pictures of the awardees. And of course, still more on politics. Bode George warns, calls for viable opposition to strengthen democracy, warns federal government to stop harassing Bala Mohammed and Makinde. Those are the leaders of the People's Democratic Party. And next to that, we have Governor Otis' diatribe won't stop Tinubu APC's victory in 2027. That's coming from Orji Uzokalu, the former governor of Abia State. And right next to it too, security beef up as local government workers resume in Osun State. Well, I wonder what the security threat in that state is. And FG okays stiffer measures against exam malpractices. We had that story in the body of the news. Well, let's move on to the Punch, where we have similar headlines circulating. But first, I want to point out the top right-hand corner. Very unfortunate if it may come to pass. It says Joshua, referring to Anthony Joshua, may quit boxing
after car crash. We look more at that later.
Yeah.
In the middle of that as well, we have same Venezuela, Maduro arraigned in U.S. court amid protests. We were looking at earlier how people were reacting to what is going on with Venezuela's Nicolas Maduro, and he says that he is still president, but we'll break that down further later on. In the Punch as well, top left-hand corner, we have insurgency. AU extends Nigeria other joint military operations. In the middle there, we have Sahara Group eyes 7,000 megawatts in major power sector push. Charles, maybe you'll give us a little bit of a rundown there, seeing that you have been on top of the power sector lately. But let's keep going with what the headlines have. Finally, in the Punch, we have Nigerians cut household spending by 14 trillion naira as inflation bites hard. Interesting.
Well, I think among all these papers in The Guardian, I think we have a very unique headline there. Tax reform risks sluggish, uncertain execution timelines over tardy NSW. That is National Single Window. So, you know, the tax reforms have been very, very much in the news, and every Nigerian seems to be reacting to its provisions. But then there's this analysis in The Guardian newspaper that it's a bit awkward considering the nitty-gritty of its implementation, and of course the lack of interagency cooperation, and then of course the delay in the rollout of the NSW. Will also be taking a look at that. I think that's the standout headline in The Guardian newspaper, Yolanda.
And finally, well, in the local papers, we have the Daily Independent. We still see the same, a bit of the same there, but we do have some differences with Afeni Ferry in the top left-hand corner, laments kidnappings in Ondo, Kwara, Ogun, Oshun, and others. Unfortunately, this is something we keep speaking about, and it seems like a problem that is not going away anytime soon. We also have the Nigerian market cap hits 100 trillion naira, signals investor confidence. Let's see how that turns out. Still in Daily Independent, we have harassment of a governor's assault on federalist structure. That's from Bode George. At the bottom there, we have Nigeria's 2026 aggregate growth hinges on policy, technology, and others. Shall we look at the international papers, Charles?
Oh, well, in the international papers, Yolanda, I think you have to pull that out, because at some point I've been trying to get get a grip of what's happening
That's fine.
in the local papers now.
All right.
So there's a whole lot there, but I think the major standout story is the story on the Venezuelan president's fate. That's talking about Nicolas Maduro, but you continue, let's see.
Okay. So in the Times, just as you've said, we have the Maduro story. Defiant Maduro tells U.S. court, I am a prisoner of war. Still in that, we have drivers over 70 to face compulsory eyesight test. I would believe 70 is rightfully so to take an eye test. Daily Mirror, same thing. We have a tyrant captured by lunatic. One president in cuffs, but fears Trump's set to launch new missions. These headlines become more and more interesting with each day. We have same thing in the Daily Express. Still talking about Maduro, but as well in the middle, we have new warning over hidden danger of salt in diet. I wonder what that touches on. Daily Star, man baby united. We have make the Red Devils great again with Trump on the front.
That's pretty interesting. You know, Manchester United recently, or just yesterday, got rid of their manager, Ruben Amorim, and then of course the Star actually seems to make a connection between the sack of Amorim and United States President Donald Trump. But it will be very interesting to find out what that nexus is between the two stories.
All right. I think it's time for us to take a look at the newspapers now in depth. Let's start with This Day, where we have Wike, Basiru in dramatic clash over Fubara's second term. Charles, what are your opinions on this?
Well, it appears the Minister of the Federal Capital Territory, Nyesom Wike, is the stormy petrel of Nigeria's politics now, transcending both the People's Democratic Party, his own party, and the party whose government is working for the All Progressives Congress. So the man seems to be in a little bit of confusion where his loyalties lie, and I really don't blame him. He has refused to leave the People's Democratic Party, but he has a major stake in the All Progressives Congress because he is serving in this party. So now, previously in Rivers State, it did appear as if his authority remained unchallenged. The clash between him and the Rivers State Governor, Siminalayi Fubara, led to a 6-month suspension of the governor. Then it came to a point where it appeared as if the problem between the two men had been properly dealt with, and of course they had hugged and made up, or so it appeared. But then probably behind the scenes the tensions continued to simmer. So what did Fubara do? He leaves the People's Democratic Party and joins the APC, and then it appears to even the odds because now he is directly under the protection of the All Progressives Congress. Remember, Wike is an outsider where the APC is concerned. So this time around, Debola Basiru, the APC National Secretary, is insisting that Wike is attempting to destabilize the APC in River State, and that won't be tolerated.
Yes, well, and I'm sorry to cut you short, but that's what I actually wanted to ask you, because the report that we took earlier was saying that the APC is actually asking him to resign as minister. What do you make of that? They're saying that he should focus, he should immediately resign and face his obsession with the politics of River State.
Well, actually, the rule of thumb is that the governors, the state governors, are the leaders of the parties, of the political parties in their respective states. It does seem to stand in most states. But then in some states, for instance, there is always that clash because there's a godfather at the federal level who appears to have a controlling interest, probably because he nominated the governor for the position. So as long as he is the one who facilitated the election of the state governor, then he still wants to continue to control the state governor. And remember, that is what happened in Rivers State. I mean, it's out there in the open. And at some point, the governor, who is supposed to be the leader of the party in the state, got the short end of the stick. And Wike made it very clear to everyone who cared to listen that he was the one who held the reins of power in Rivers State. His authority absolutely unchallenged.
Now, in tandem with what you are saying, Wike actually responded, and we also held this in our report earlier on, where he warned the APC National Secretary to stay out of River State politics, saying that the state is a no-go area for political interference.
Well, of course, I mean, it still boils down to basically the same flow, the flow of the story. The APC's National Secretary, of course, is standing firmly behind Governor Fubara, because now, as a member, as a bona fide member of the APC, he is the recognized leader of the All Progressives Congress in Rivers State. Now, remember, Wike is not a member of the APC. So, in this regard, the APC's National Secretary is looking at him as a rank outsider. As a non-member of the APC, you have no controlling interest over an APC governor in your state. But then if you're so keen about controlling the APC in Rivers State, then resign your appointment in an APC government and come back to Rivers State and play opposition politics.
Wow. You
can't be serving an APC government and opposing an APC governor. And so, what does Wike say? You are not a citizen of Rivers State. You don't come from Rivers State. You don't have any stakes in Rivers State. So this is between us, Rivers State brothers. So better steer clear of River State politics.
Well, it's a developing story, so we wait and see how that all turns out. Still keeping up with this day newspaper, we have another story there. 9 soldiers die, 5 seriously injured in a mine blast. Now, according to military sources, the Nigerian army lost 5 soldiers to an IED in Borno State. The incident left 5 other soldiers injured. Now, this incident actually occurred in Damasak, Gubi, and on their way from Gubbio.
Gubbio, yes.
So the troops reorganized and then returned to Gubbio once the IED exploded. I mean, we're seeing so many of these terrorist attacks. Can this be counted amongst them?
Absolutely, but you see, the issue, the use of IEDs is a known modus operandi of the insurgents, particularly in the northeast. Whenever they are on the retreat, they mine the path because they know that the military forces, the armed forces, would be coming after them. So to slow them down or even, dissuade any pursuit, they'll always mine their path of retreat. Then, on the other hand, it appears as if the Nigerian armed forces are yet to learn a very critical lesson. Beware of IEDs. These days there are actually vehicles that are IED resistant, and in sophisticated fields of operation, they are always in the lead. They drive over the path, detonate the bombs because a buried IED responds to weight. So you have these vehicles driving over the path where the insurgents have mined the area, detonate them, render them useless, and then the rest of the ground soldiers drive past. So I think it is time our armed forces invest very heavily in anti-IED vehicles. It will reduce incidents like this, incidents of unexpected military casualties.
Now, speaking of terrorism, still on that topic, earlier we took a report about the alleged terrorism financing and how the court denied Bauchi commissioner and others bail. This is a very sensitive issue to speak on. But apparently the High Court in Abuja on Monday declined to grant a bail application that was filed. So I don't know what you make of this, because there was such a high amount of money involved, which was $9.7 million for terrorism financing charges.
They were denied bail because the court said they still constituted, that's the commissioner and his cohorts, they still constitute a security threat. So granting them bail meant giving them the freedom to operate. So until they are proven innocent, excuse me, then they still have to remain in custody. But then it now brings us to another issue. You remember some years back, the international police, the Interpol, actually made it clear that they had handed over a list of terrorism financiers in Nigeria. That list has remained under wraps till now. Initially, the Buhari government did say, okay, we have this list and we're going to name and shame. Let's know who the financiers of terrorism in Nigeria are. Unfortunately, up till this moment, the only terrorism financier we have on record that is in the public domain happens to be that commissioner from Bauchi State. So who are the rest? That is the question Nigerians are eagerly waiting to have an answer to. Please make that list public. Or are we protecting some people?
We wait and see. Now also we look at one of the main headlines, which has been this controversial issue on what has happened in Venezuela with the capturing of Nicolas Maduro by the U.S. forces. Now, if I can just remind us all what happened, the U.S. launched a large-scale attack over the weekend, I believe it was on Saturday, capturing the Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro and his wife. This happened in the dead of the night. They came in, they captured him and his wife, and there were no reports at the time that Congress was ever notified of that strike.
Yeah, Mr. Trump did say notifying the Congress would actually leak information. He said Congress is always fraught with leakages, so it was supposed to be a top secret operation with the element of surprise. So going through Congress would have actually leaked the details of the operation and probably robbed it of its surprise value, which played a very critical role in their successful capture of Nicolas Maduro.
And thank you for that update there. But as well, unfortunately, tragically, according to Venezuelan authorities, innocent people actually lost their lives and were killed during the strike.
That is what you refer to as collateral damage.
That's right. That's right. Shortly after that, we know that President Trump held a press conference at Mar-a-Lago and has stated that the U.S. was going to decide who leads Venezuela. For I think the most recent update now is that they have. The U.S. has said that they are going to be in charge until they decide who is actually eligible. This is a regime change.
But remember, the Trump administration did recognize Delcy Rodriguez.
That's right.
As that's Mr. Maduro's deputy president.
Yes.
I mean, she is the one recognized by the Trump administration for now as the head of the government in Venezuela. However, Maduro insists that he is still very much in charge, even though he is actually in chains in the United States of America, but he has remained basically defiant. And I think that's the focus of the headline, despite the fact that Mr. Maduro is in the United States custody and in a U.S. court, he still considers himself the president of Venezuela.
Well, Trump is not stopping there. I mean, there's so much talk about how Trump and the U.S. will ultimately enrich itself with all the oil it needs out of Venezuela.
Oh, of course. I mean, that probably appears to be the major target. Not necessarily regime change. I mean, if Maduro had actually cooperated with the United States ambitions and aspirations in Venezuela, then I'm very sure we would be looking at a different, we'll be telling a different story now.
What's interesting as well is that when Trump spoke about what was happening in Venezuela, he mentioned that this intervention would not be the last, which is quite terrifying to hear. And in tandem with that, Trump is actually intensifying his stance on needing Greenland, stating that Greenland is fully on his mind for America's national defense. But my question in all of this is, where is the UN and the ICJ? Yes, they've responded, but it seems a little, a little watered down for what the globe is expecting.
When it comes to international politics or international conflicts, the UN has a very limited influence. Otherwise, Israel versus Palestine wouldn't have happened. We wouldn't have had Russia versus Ukraine. We wouldn't be having the United States abducting a sitting president. So there are lots of things that the UN can't do, especially when it comes to these countries with a lot of leverage. However, maybe they can actually interfere or intervene in weaker nations like Liberia, where former President Charles Taylor was actually dragged up to the ICJ and convicted and is behind bars as at the moment. I don't know what became of Taylor, but I hope he's still alive.
And keeping up with what the world leaders are saying and the global reactions that we're getting out of that, I believe so many of the world leaders are torn between how to react and where to stand. Because what Trump has done is very controversial. I know that Keir Starmer has come up and said that the UK is not involved in any way. They have completely distanced themselves, but at the same time and in the same breath, they're saying, well, they're seeking more information before releasing official comments. That is the same as well.
There is always that public rhetoric. Somebody has to actually take a stand publicly, but you know what happens behind the scenes. The United States and the United Kingdom appear to be the international twins of global politics. So even if Keir Starmer questions the morality of what the United States has done, and I'm sure when it comes down to the brass tacks, the UK will stand firmly with the US.
So what do you make now of the response from Russia? Because Russia is an ally of Venezuela, and they say that they are extremely concerned and they are seeking immediate clarification.
If Russia had the
situation.
capacity and the capability,
I'm sure
they would have done the very same thing in Ukraine. So it deprives Russia of the moral right to question what the United States has done in Venezuela. Of course, that does not in any way justify President Trump's actions, but like I said, if Vladimir Putin had the capacity and the capability of doing it, he would have actually done the same thing with the Ukrainian president.
And then looking at the neighbors there, Colombia is also tightening their belts. They have started deploying forces around the borders in preparation for an influx of refugees that they expect to be coming in from Venezuela.
Okay, well, because you know Colombia was also mentioned by Trump as probably the next port of call. You know, repeating a similar kind of operation there.
Very well stated. Anyway, thank you so much, Charles. That was very interesting speaking to you today about the newspaper headlines.